Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Red Room. I'm Heather Carlisle, and I'm teaching about the components of a marriage relationship. I break it down into 6 components. Tonight is 5 of the 6, and tonight is the romantic bond. I've said earlier that when those of us who love marriage and are marriage counselors and want to teach, how do we do it? What is it? And then how do we make it happen in our lives? That it's 2 things. Number 1, we're best friends. And number 2, we're romantic. We have a romantic bond. So we've talked a lot about the components of what makes up a best friendship. And of course, bottom line to all of that is we like the same things, we have the same priorities, values, standards, and that we talk about them, we share them. Talk about anything. Talk about anything safely. Solve problems without conflict or fighting. Understand each other. Forgive when we make a mistake. All those kinds of things to be best friends. And then add on top of that the romantic bond, that feeling of attraction, that feeling of wanting to be with the other person. They're almost like our North Pole that we're magnetically attracted to, that romantic bond. And it's often thought of as a sexy bond, and I think that if it's healthy, it is a sexy bond. So the romantic bond has to do with connecting with each other intimately in all the ways possible to connect with another human. And that's when we think about the wedding ceremony or marriage, the two become one. We are united because we have this bond that's best friends and romantic. So the romantic part has to do with that chemistry feeling. Now, in the very beginning of a marriage, and when Jack and I teach together, he's the guy that likes to teach about the love cocktail. And the love cocktail is that there's no drug on the planet Earth more divine, more irresistible, and more delicious, nor more sexy than falling in love with someone. Really falling in love. I think that we can fall in love at various degrees and various ways with different people. And yet there's that experience that some of us have, and I didn't have it until I met Jack, where every part of who I was completely attracted and lost in loving this man. Still is. I mean, the love cocktail has worn off, and it does wear off, because if we were in the presence of that, all those brain chemicals that happen when we fall in love with each other, we'd probably never get much done, because we'd want to be touching each other, looking into each other's eyes, laughing together, sharing things, and just being in this luscious bond that we know as that romantic chemistry. Well, that, as you may know, it ends, and it varies how long we're immersed in this delicious passion. But it ends after, if it's a great relationship, about 1.5 years. And the love poems that we encounter, those great, passionate, sexual, obsessive, delicious, poetic things that we experience in love songs, in poetry, in the great romantic movies, that's the yumminess that lasts about 1.5 years. So, once the 1.5 years is over, are we deprived of that? No. However, all those chemicals mixing around in our brains aren't just naturally or autonomically there. If we want romance, we need to decide that we want some romantic time or a romantic style. or a romantic skill. And I think of those first months, that first year and a half of being in love as kind of like training wheels, where we have the experience of what it's like to experience the ecstasy of the romantic bond, the feeling of being in love, the thinking of being passionately in love, the physicality of being passionately in love. It's like a benchmark, and it's like, oh, there is nothing better in the whole world than what it's like really falling in love with a great love. Well, once that has softened and dissipated, because now we know each other, we've explored most of our thoughts together, our making lovingness together, our sexuality together, our philosophies, our favorite places in the world, our favorite foods. We've mostly adventured into all of those corners. And the newness is part of what makes that passion so intense. Because one of the things that keeps passion alive is novelty and arousal. Now, novelty means something new. And in the beginning, it takes about a year and a half for you to really walk beside each other through all different circumstances and experiences and thoughts and opinions in life. Then the novelty is going to get subdued, and the novelty won't pop up naturally very often unless we decide. Unless we decide that we want something new. Then we can go and get it, or we can create it. So novelty and arousal. Arousal meaning your system is aroused. You know, stress. There's eustress and distress. Distress is the stress that quickens all of our systems because we're alarmed in some way. Eustress quickens all of our systems because we're excited and kind of turned on or thrilled in certain ways. So it's that novelty and arousal, that kind of arousal that we want to make our romantic bond intense and to continue after the year and a half. So we've got to plan the novelty and arousal. Sometimes it just happens. Sometimes life throws us experiences or new things or new children or whatever it is, throws us those new experiences that create novelty and arousal. But I would prefer that we do it artfully, that we decide what kind of novelty and arousal we want. And when I remember those years of being taught fine arts, my favorite definition of creativity, real creativity, fine art creativity, is choice. I choose that this is my favorite line, or this is my favorite sculpture, or this is my favorite color or texture. That's art, what I choose. So that's why I call my book Designer Marriage, because it's a design, it's an art, it's what we choose. And how we do the romantic bond, how we create that novelty and arousal, how we get that juiciness, that intimacy, is up to us after that first year and a half, where we just get to immerse and relish the passion and deliciousness of being intensely in love. Welcome, viewers, everyone who checks in as my hour rolls on. Tonight I'm talking about, as you can see, the romantic bond. And anytime you have a question or some kind of a response, I love to hear from you. That always takes me off on an enriching path for the other listeners or viewers. So welcome, and welcome your questions and your ideas. So this romantic bond that requires novelty and arousal, you know that that's the thing that most of us have heard. If you want a good relationship, you need to work on it. And then what do they tell us? Do they tell us how to do that? Have they modeled it? How many couples have you personally been around, where you could feel that chemistry, that romantic bond. Because largely we're not taught how to do that. We know now how to do it today. And my very favorite source of how to do the romance is Jeffrey Goddick. He is the man who's done all the research and the legwork to create these wonderful books called 1001 Romantic Things to Do with Your Love. And it's not Jeffrey, it's Gregory. That's the author's name. You Google him, you will find the best of the best. I have in my private practice office his most recent book. It's about this thick. It's 1001 recipes. They're not long, maybe at the most a page, maybe a paragraph, 1001 things to do. And when I introduce that to couples in my private practice office, they look at the book, it's like, fine. And then I ask them to open it. Just open it. I don't care where, just open the book. and immediately, it doesn't matter where they open it, they look at the page and there may be 3 to 5 suggestions on romantic things to do. You can depend on it. That they look at the book and then they get involved and they start reading because it's so fun. It's so interesting. In truth, creating that romantic bond with novelty and arousal is what we think of as play without adult supervision for adults. The romantic bond is the deliciousness that we do to love each other. Not necessarily say, think, or feel, but do. We need it to be expressed or the beloved doesn't know. So when we're building this romantic bond after that year and a half, this is how you work on your marriage. You want to always be putting in something that enriches that romantic bond that has to do with novelty and arousal. Maybe you like to go to the same restaurant to take your beloved out to dinner, but you add something new by the conversation that you have, or by maybe a new dessert, something new that you share. That's one of the things that's so delightful about those of us who are foodies. We love good food and gourmet food, which means there's no end of deliciousness in the kitchen that you can do together or for each other. That's just right there. It's a simple thing. And there you go, the source of novelty and arousal for the rest of your lives. That's one that's always accessible. Then there are the languages of love. And I'm sure most of you have heard of the 5 love languages. I love Chapman's book on the 5 love languages, and I think he introduces it beautifully. And yet it's pretty simple. If you've got the download that I posted for today, it's just a little quick quiz that I give couples in my private practice office to say, would you two fill this out? And then I have a whiteboard and I do this little game if I have time. It's kind of fun. Where usually I'll have him go up first, because usually, not always, he's the one who doesn't get it quite right. Because guys are more connected with a sense of what they want rather than an empathy of what others want. After all, it's the women who have to keep the babies alive, right? So, not to make him feel bad or anything, but I just want him to be sensitive to what she needs, because after all, that's how he gets what he needs. And sometimes I actually say that to couples. You know, I'm going to bat for you. I want this marriage, and I want you to get what you want. I don't want you to shoot yourself in the foot. So let's figure out how you get a win every time. So I have both of them rank the 5 love languages, 1 through 5, depending on which one they like best and which one is okay, but that's the last on their list. And then I have them guess what their partner is going to write. And then I have him go up and write on the whiteboard his list, his ranking, and then what he guesses hers is. Then I have her go up and list her rankings and her guess for what his is. Do you know, in the hundreds of couples that I've worked with, there's only been one couple that got each other's love languages completely right, completely accurately. They weren't that old either. They were probably in their late 30s, early 40s. So you want to know, your number one agenda is to know your partner's top two love languages, because thereby you foster the romantic bond. And if it just happens that your number one love language is his number 5, or if his number one love language is your number 5, you've probably been wasting your time and energy doing something that really doesn't get you much kudos or credit. And then, bottom line, it doesn't make them feel like they're really loved. It doesn't bring them close to you in that romantic bond. So what you want to know and make your top priority is, how does your beloved experience love in their favorite way? For example, if your beloved, their top number one love language is acts of service. So acts of service means doing nice things. Let's say it's her. So she feels more loved than any other way in the whole world when you do an act of service, when you do something nice for her. That could be, and what you want to know then is, what's her list of priorities? Because, I mean, you could do the laundry, but she really thinks you're her hero when you change the furnace filters. Laundry, well, then that's kind of nice, but changing the furnace filters, she'll talk about it for a whole month. Now, you and I would never guess that unless you go and ask her and find out. And one of the little things that I do, it's so simple, and people don't think to do it. It's so right here, powerful, and there's no puzzle about it. Ask your partner, okay, when I change the furnace filter, 0 to 10, how good does that make you feel? And you're thinking, it's like about 2, and she says 10. Oh, okay. What else gets a 10? If changing the furnace filter gets a 10, and she says, yeah, it gets a 10 because I hate going into the dust, and I'm afraid of spiders and bugs in there, and it's just you. And when you do it, you're my hero. So there are 1,000 things that happen. I mean, I'm just using a guesstimation, but things that happen in life, day to day, week to week, year to year. And you want to know the ones that make your partner feel special, that you really love them and you really pay attention. Now, it's kind of tragic when a couple gets together and her number one love language is words. She needs to hear the words, I love you. Not once, every day. And he's thinking, well, I already said it once, she knows it. And his bottom of the list love language is words, because guess what? When he was young, people didn't tell him the truth. Or they said things to kind of flatter him, empty flattery. So he doesn't trust words. He doesn't like words. And he especially doesn't like sugary words, because that feels like he's being manipulated. So he doesn't understand that when she hears the words, I love you, it's a sacred moment. And that she needs to hear it every day, and her heart sings. Unless he finds out that's her number one love language. And then when she hears him say at the end of a phone conversation, like Jack and I do, bye honey, I love you, that I love you, even though it's every time there's a phone call, he gets a 10. He needs to know that. And he needs to know that even though he thinks words are cheap, they're not cheap to her. They are the utmost of sanctity and romance. So do you have any questions? Those of you who have tuned in, any questions about romance, the romantic bond, your sexual bond? I'm fascinated to hear what you're wondering about. Okay, so the five love languages, of course, are affectionate touch. And if you're a really healthy relationship and you're pretty integrated, affectionate touch usually means satisfying sexuality, where you really know each other sexually, you know your preferences, you know how it works for you, you know what doesn't work, and you stay in those bounds of enjoying it and making sure that your partner is feeling comfortable and pleasured, and that you put yourself in a position where your partner knows that you are being the receiver of pleasure. Um, Someone says, okay, you say it's over at 18 months. Why does this happen? Good question. Why does this happen? Partly I gave you the clues to that already. That we call it a cathexis bond. Let me type that for you. Get my mouse in there. A cathexis bond is a sense of self and your own space, where usually you have a sense of this is me, this is my space. When you fall in love with somebody, you drop that boundary and you move it out to embrace the other. So you move it out to embrace the other in your space, which is why we're almost like we're obsessed, because we want to be looking at the other person, talking to the other person, seeing the other person, touching the other person. They are now a part of us, bonded to us. And in that state, you're doing this. Oh, your favorite dessert is key lime pie? Guess what mine is? Key lime pie. Oh, you wanted always to study Brazilian in school? That's what I did too. I mean, I even listened to all the Brazilian songs. Oh, you don't like Fords? I don't like Fords either. I really have always wanted a Jaguar. Oh, you have too? Oh, you like watching football? Well, you know, in my past, nobody around me liked football, and I just love it. Oh my gosh, can we share that? So do you see, you're sharing all the happy things. You're sharing all the things you like. And the other person is mirroring back to you that you find all these coincidences, all of these similar likes, all of these things that you just love about each other, that you love to do together. After about a year and a half, you've walked side by side through life, through enough of things that you pretty much exhausted that newness supply of discovering things that you have in common. And now you know that you have all of these things in common. So then you're losing that element of novelty and arousal, and you're losing that fascination and wanting more and wanting more and wanting more, because now you've kind of covered all the bases. And you've explored all the different sex positions. You've explored all the ways of kissing. You've gone different places together. You've enjoyed whatever it is that you love to enjoy together. And now the world calls, where you need to do your job or your work or take care of the other people in your life. And slowly but surely that bond starts to dissolve so that you can reconnect with the other things in your life. So that energetic bond then just naturally falls away as you get to know each other and you get the thrill of knowing all the good stuff. That's the point when I want people to then and only then consider whether or not this is a long-term relationship, because at that point you start seeing all the human parts. It's like, oh, you're a night person, but I really like getting up early in the morning. Well, we can work with that. Well, you start seeing the things that don't match. It takes some time to see the things that don't match, but at that point you're now what we call individuated. the cathexis has dissolved, and that psychological bond where you're so obsessed with the other and all the wonders that you're discovering together, it's dissolved away, and now you can see the other person intelligently and completely. Both all the wonders and the things that don't match, or the foibles or undeveloped parts of them. At that point, you're saying, well, you really like watching football. I really don't, but that's not a deal breaker for me. You don't want children, but I've dreamed of having children all my life. I want at least 5 children. That might be a deal breaker. Even though you've fallen in love and it's delicious, the great wishes and dreams that you have now that don't match may not be enough to pull you through a long-term relationship. And there's only that way of finding it out, is walking beside each other through that. Okay, so are you saying that we should concentrate on our common interests even when we already know we have them in common? No, not necessarily. Novelty and arousal, new things. But if you want to develop the bond, that means spending quality time together. Usually, the smartest way to spend quality time together is on something that you both love. So, for example, if you both love golf, why try tennis and swimming when golf is just one of your great passions and loves? And then you find ways where golf is designed into your relationship. Now, if you want to explore tennis together, cool. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, you've got golf. Does that make sense? My husband and me do have things in common, but we have a lot of not matches, and that's not uncommon. And sometimes couples will come to me, and I have a passion list that's about 7 or 8 pages long. And I'll have people go through that passion list and edit it down to just the things that they really like, or would like if they could do it or have it, or they'd like to try it. And it's hard when I'll have a couple do the passion list, and when we come up with these 2 short lists of what they really like, there aren't any matches. Well, the truth is, there can be. You and I know there can be. And that's when we get creative. So, for example, this person has a great passion for camping. Their family camped every year. They went on a family trip, and they made it great fun. They were good at it, and they went the coolest places. This person has never been camping, doesn't really know much about it, but really likes the outdoors. So there's a possible match. We don't know until they actually go camping together, or they go into the outdoors together, one or the other. But there's probably going to be a match there that they can find with each other, and it'll be novelty and arousal exploring it. So are you saying it's possible to be falling in love again? Exactly. You got it. It takes novelty and arousal and doing the fun things together that you both love, and you see each other doing it, and fall in love. Like, for example, if a guy loves fishing and his wife thinks she'd like it, but she's never done it before, he's going to sit there in the boat and watch her bait her hook and absolutely fall in love with her. She is so cute and adorable putting that worm or whatever it is on that hook. She's having a hard time and she's giggling. He's fallen in love with her. He's never seen her do that before, and she's so irresistibly adorable. So those kinds of things. Notice what's required for him to fall in love with her at that moment is the thing that I introduced the Red Room to the world with. The concept that I say is more precious than platinum, more daring than diamonds, and more caring than kisses. I wonder if any of you remember what that is. It is the true work, capital W-O-R-K, of love. And it's paying attention, undivided attention. So if he's watching her bait that hook, putting the worm on it, he's watching carefully with his full attention her fingers, her face, the hook and everything. If he suspends everything that he is just to enjoy her, he's falling in love with her that moment in a way that he's never seen her before. She looks over at him, she sees his eyes adoring her, and it floods her being with gratitude and love for him. Something that simple. So that is the falling in love again. That when we pay attention and when it's something new or different or something that we've done over and over again, but we pay attention with everything that we have, looking through the eyes of love. In that moment, there's that falling in love feeling. That falling in love feeling, it comes in our heart, in our emotional system, comes through our mind, what we love mentally, intellectually, philosophically, what we love physically, sensing, touch, pleasure, what we love spiritually, the wonder and beauty and awe and reverence for all life. So falling in love in those moments over the years means that we experience and allow ourselves to immerse in the experience of paying full attention with the eyes of love open to the other person. Now, of course, we can design and create the circumstances to set ourselves up to do that, and that's my ideal. It's pretty common that we don't see couples behave like that or look at each other like that. If you've seen that, you probably have never forgotten it, because it's such a beautiful thing. It's a vulnerable thing. It's a tender thing, usually. Sometimes it's just a moment where you're seeing a husband helping his wife into the car, and he's not just walking around and opening and closing the door. He's walking beside her and he just places his hand under her elbow. But it's the way he pays attention to the gesture and how he touches her that says he may have done this 100 times, and yet every time it's, I adore this woman. And this is the one simple thing that's appropriate for me to do at this point, and I can't not do it. Does that make sense? You're saying it's possible to be falling in love again? Now, one of the things that I hear from couples is one of them says, I don't love you anymore. I'm not in love with you anymore. And if we don't keep ourselves clean emotionally, where every day we make sure we've got a clean slate, if there's something irritating or something hurtful, we have that complaint with a request for change. We put it up front in a respectful and kind way and figure it out, and then it's done. If we don't do that, and the little irritations build up, or the hurts build up, or the insults, and then it becomes a conflictual relationship or a hostile relationship, the couple is probably not going to feel love, because there's so much built up in the heart and in the mind and the essence of your being where you've been threatened or hurt or in some way disrespected. You can't afford to open your heart anymore. And you're not going to feel the love. You're not going to feel the falling in love. So when I'm working with a couple and they've actually talked about divorce, and one of them says, I'll do anything. I love you more than ever. And the other one says, well, I'm not in love with you anymore. I can't tell, and they can't tell, about being in love again until the hurts are forgiven and healed. Once the hurts are forgiven and healed and you start pouring on the love again, the falling in love usually returns if it's a good relationship. If this relationship is not a good relationship, it's toxic and it's conflictual and volatile, probably even when the wounds are hurt, there's still not going to be that falling in love feeling anymore. Does that make sense? More questions, dears. So if we want that falling in love feeling, we need to be responsible for it and design it. And we can be responsible for it, or we can say, ooh, I get to do it. And that's the good news and the bad news, isn't it? I have to do it. I get to do it, which means I get to choose. I get to design. And when you go into books like Gregory Goddick's books or Laura Korn, you've probably seen Laura Korn's books, and I take my hat off to her. My scarf. Laura Korn is an author, and she's created these fascinating books. You go into Barnes & Noble and take one off the shelf, and you open it, you can't see much because they're all envelopes that are sealed. Each one is like a date recipe, either for romantic evenings or for some kind of sexual fun. And some of them are for her, some of them are for him. And it says whether they're inexpensive or expensive. And if you need inspiration and you're kind of doing the same thing over and over again and you want novelty and arousal, go to Goddick's works, go to works like Laura Korn, and there are many others, of course, but those are my two favorite because they're eminently practical and very precise. Their recipe may not suit you or your spouse exactly, but it'll give you ideas. We all need ideas because we live in a culture that hasn't, frankly, had the time, intention, education, knowledge, resources, or priority to become expertly romantic. And we do have the time and resources and interest and priority now, which means inform yourself and play. It's going to take time out of your life. And you put time into your life that creates that romantic bond. It's fun and it's delicious. Getting that love cocktail, even if just for 5 minutes, makes everything in the world brighter, happier. Okay, you guys, questions. Tell me how you're doing with this. One of the things that it comes to the surface often is a sexual relationship is floundering or troubled or sparse. And people will come to me and say, we're having problems. Our sex life is almost gone or gone. And it's interesting to me when I get to that place and it's a safe thing for me to do, I'll look at her and I'll say, when you guys are sexual, when you're making love, how good is he, 0 to 10? She'll usually say, he's a 10. Oh. And I look at him and I say, did you know you were a 10? No, I didn't. So it's not that he isn't a good lover. It's because he's done some things that hurt her feelings or disrespected her, and he may not even know what he did. And sometimes it's because she's too shy to tell him. But sometimes it's a conflict because they don't know how to resolve problems, and they've hurt each other with fighting. Let's see what we got here. Heather, did you see my questions above? Which ones? Let's see here. Oh, you're the pink one. Exactly. I don't feel like, oh, okay, good. Sorry. I don't feel like I love him like I did, even though I know I love him. But it's the knowing, not the feeling of love anymore. That's exactly it. Thank you. Thank you for, for knocking on my window. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That we know we love the other person, but we're not getting the romantic juice feeling. Now it's not going to be all day long every day. It may not even be once a week unless you know what you're doing. But you're going to need to find ways to pay attention to him where you learn more about him or you experience more things with him and you actively appreciate him for that. Notice it's doing the loving thing is just as much and sometimes more for those of us who are doing the loving thing as it is for the person who's receiving it. Because when I do the loving thing, I'm experiencing myself as a loving woman, which means I am now predisposed and sensitive to loving. Problem. Problem is no juice. No juice. What kind of juice? Because seems exhausting. Ooh, does that mean romance or your sex life? It may seem, if it seems exhausting, dear, then that says that you're not getting enough renewal. You're not getting enough, whatever it is that you need to feel healthy and happy. So and sometimes if it's exhausting, that means that you're not getting love back in the way that you need to get love back so that it makes you feel loved, and that in turn gives you energy. Juice is your term. Yeah, it is one of my terms. Exhausting to work so hard on getting juice. Yes. Yes. That makes perfect sense to me. And something's not working, something's not, the two of you aren't on the same page and dialoguing so that you know what gets you a 10 out of 10, or he knows what gets him a 10 out of 10. Because if it's exhausting to you, then there's something that you have to give, and it takes what he's asking of you, what he needs of you, takes too much of you. So that's not going to work. You're going to have to find something else. Like, for example, the couple where, say, she likes camping and he likes the outdoors. Well, I like the outdoors, but I hate camping because it's exhausting to me. So if I were the woman in that relationship, it would end up that camping would be exhausting to me, even though I would like it, unless we get help. We've got a trail guide or something, somebody that does the dishes, cooks the meals, you get my gist. Otherwise, camping, which is one of his love languages and one of his fun things, is going to tire me out, and I'm not going to feel loved or loving in that situation. So we want you to find the ways where it's easy to get juice. Now, let me give you an example. One of the things that gives me great juice is traveling to an exotic country. Exotic to me. I don't like third world countries. I like to stay at really cool hotels or on the beach or something. Now, say that that costs way too much for my budget right now. But just dreaming about it gives me juice. Just us talking about it gives me juice. So, which means I get a smile on my face. Oh, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. It may fuel me and give me enthusiasm, energy, which is the opposite of being tired. Energetic, enthusiastic, excited. Planning it, talking about it, taking classes about it, researching it, and saving the money for it. Having a big map on the wall. So involving myself in that which gives me juice instantly, the stuff that I just love. So, for example, when Jack and I go to the opera, oh my gosh, that gives me juice because I'm sitting there and I'm weeping. I'm so involved in it. And then I'm loving him like the heroine is loving the hero. And then afterwards, we're talking about it. I'm already full of juice because it's easy for me to get juice at the opera. And then I share it with him, and it's novelty and arousal. So if you're exhausting yourself to get juice, obviously that's probably inefficient, probably quote unquote too expensive of your energy. And there need to be places where you get energy rather than feel like you're having to give energy. Does that make sense? Do you have some places in the world, and you may not know, I don't know, where you get juice? You know, like for example, I know somebody who loves horses. Go riding on a horse, to get off that horse, and you're just higher than a kite. You're just full of energy and excitement. It's like, oh, that was incredible, you know, that. So if you have a partner who loves horseback riding too, that's easy juice. You may be physically drained a bit, but you're excited, you're talking, and there's that novelty and arousal chemistry there. So do you know what it is that makes you excited, gives you that novelty and arousal feeling where it energizes you? You know, there's that distinction between the introvert and the extrovert. The extrovert gets energy being with people and visiting and talking. The introvert gets energy with some quiet time and alone time and introspection. So you want to know where you get energy so you've got energy to spend. If you're an extrovert and you're too solitary, then you want to be around people laughing and talking and doing something cool, not in a bar, because you don't talk and do cool stuff there. You know what I mean? And so you want to pump up your energy. If you're too solitary and you're an extrovert, you want to be around people. If you're an introvert and you get energy, you want to make sure that you get some quiet time where you crank up your energy happily. And then when you come out in your relationship, you've got the juice to give. So, am I on track? Does this make sense? Is this, how do you relate to this? I love this question. This is superb. It's exactly what most couples come up against. You want to know the 5 love languages, of course, which is on the handout that you download. Affectionate words of love, whether it's spoken or written. I love writing, because Jack's #1 love language is words. So I love writing things on the bathroom mirror. I love leaving him sexy voicemails. I make sure that when I send him an email, it's something intimate or kind of sexy or playful. Words of affirmation. Acts of service, doing nice things for each other, which may be like a sexy back rub, or it may be putting gas in her car. You know, you need to figure those things out. And if she doesn't know, you ask her. And then you kind of build on that. Gifts. It could be little gifts. It could be that you give her a diamond ring and she's talking about it for the next 50 years. Or she gets a flower every day and there are stars in her eyes. Quality time spent together, which means paying attention to each other or doing something that you both like the camper and the outdoors person. You need to find a way where that's quality time for both of you. Let's see. Okay, very helpful, Heather. Good, I'm on track. Okay, you help me realize I'm trying too hard on the wrong things. Aw, sweetie. It's as simple as that, isn't it? And when you're trying too hard on the wrong things, what we need is for you to find the right things. And the right things not only for him or her, but for you. Where it juices you up and it's like, ooh, I like, this is fun. Like, some people, it's just magical. Going out to the movies together and holding hands and being in the theater, you know? Other people, they want to be holding hands in the quiet in their bedroom where it's kind of alone and sexy. You know, it's like you need to know what it is that creates the romantic bond for you. Now, one of the things that I believe, and this is not 100% of course, there's a lot of talk about romance and this romantic bond. And our culture, and I think falsely, believes that women are romantic. I think that women crave romance and that the real romantics are men. And what we want as women is we crave that intimate romantic bond. And it's never so romantic as when the man does something romantic for the woman. Now, the corollary for that is something that's not very popular, and it's difficult. I think of it as flirtatiousness, flirtiness, and that sometimes it's easier to flirt with a stranger than with your beloved. Sometimes you were taught that being flirtatious is cheap and sleazy, and that a lady or a gentleman never does that. Especially a lady needs to flirt. And if you're not practiced at flirting in public, and you don't want to be because it's not appropriate, then how are you going to be practiced at flirting in private? This is something that I'm aware of. I will always work on it because I'm not good at it. I never was taught how to do it. So I want to be flirtatious with Jack. Now notice, flirtatiousness usually means a twinkle in the eye, kind of like a playful thing. So if you're a naturally happy, playful, laughing person, the mischief, the sexy mischief of being flirtatious is going to be pretty easy for you. But if you're one of those quiet or subdued or serious or thoughtful people, it may not just come off the top of your head. So romance, that romantic bond, romance, I think, largely comes from our men. Now, a woman will set it up. She'll set the table, she'll put the candles, she'll have the romantic dinner, but it really means nothing until he's there sharing it and paying full attention and appreciating it. And if he does something special, if he uses her love language, like if it's touch, he stops everything and he puts down his knife and fork and he reaches across the table to take her hand and look her right in the eye and say, "Thank you. You are the most beautiful woman in the world. I love being here with you. You are my ideal. And I hope we do this for the rest of our lives. It's so simple, and yet I love you so much." So just in that moment, those few words, stopping that. Did you notice how I did that, how I modeled it? It was like a little ritual where you stop time and pay full attention. So it can be the stopping time of saying, a little bit of flirtatiousness here. We're going to add a little sidebar of come hitherness, and I'm interested in you and I'm focusing completely on you. That kind of flirtatiousness from a woman. Notice she stopped time and she spent time on the message of flirting. He stops time and focuses on the message of bringing the flowers out from behind him and giving them to her. Not just coming to the door and giving her flowers, but figuring out some way to do it where he's playing with her a little bit. So notice how much of romance is playful. It's adult play. It really is. It's the finest sort of adult play. And then, of course, the finest sort of adult play is without adult supervision, when it's your private time, when it's your sexy time, and then it's your intimate time. Questions? So, as I've been talking, I'm so curious, dear. Have you discovered, have you thought through, have you got some ideas about what the right things are to do that are going to give you energy? Whoever's listening, if you've got something on the top of your head, would you type it in there? I'm so curious because I'm always interested in new ideas and what works for real people. And it's kind of fun for other people to see them as well. So type in something that you think gives you that novelty and arousal, kind of like playful, romantic energy. Let's see. There's one other thing before we close tonight that I wanted to share with you. Yes, here we go. This is a little intense lesson. Um, Avoiding sexual failures of traditional marriage. Traditional gender roles can be the source of loss of passion and romance in a marriage. To keep their passion alive, today's couples need to know how to avoid the 4 types of failures. So the 4 types of failures, failure, whoops, I don't have my cursor in there. Failure of timing. So failure of timing, when only one person is in charge of your sexual bond. You need to have that easy go-between where it doesn't fall all on the shoulders of one, and where both people feel desired and both people are okay with somebody starting a sexual encounter. So if it's always one way, sometimes after a while it feels like it's unfair. Then there's the failure of intimacy. Partners need to say how they feel and what they feel, rather than keeping a part of themselves separate or secret. Now, we do know that in the boudoir, in the dressing room, a lady likes to do things in secret, in private, so that when she comes out in her sexy stuff, it's like, ta-da! I don't want him seeing me putting it on, you know? So there's a little privacy there, but you don't want to keep secrets from each other. It's then a block between the free flow of being best friends and then being very intimate with your sexuality. You need to be able to talk about that in a kind and caring way, in the appropriate way, which means not in the bedroom. They may also lose themselves by pleasing or deferring, which also leads to frustration and resentment, which means always pleasing the other person, deferring to the other person. It needs to be a back and forth give and take if it's an intimate relationship. Intimacy means giving and receiving. That intimate bond means it's not all going one way. Sooner or later, there's going to feel hurt and resentment, if not victimhood. Then we have the failure of sexual empathy. So, failure of sexual empathy. Empathy for the other person. A woman needs to know how a man is with his sexual nature, with his arousal, with his pleasure. And oh my gosh, in my opinion, a woman is like 40 times more complicated sexually than a man is. Fortunately, in my experience, our men are very patient, they're very interested, and they really want to know how to give their beloved pleasure. And they're patient, they'll do anything in that regard, but not always. So, partners need to know, respect, and tend to their spouse's needs. Gender differences create one set of needs for women and another set of needs for men. Personality styles and past influences also create differences which deserve kind respect. So that means as you move through the months and years, learning each other like an instrument. A woman learns from man so that she can play his pleasure like a musical instrument. A man needs to know a woman so he can play her body like a musical instrument, where both feel just humbled and grateful at the willingness of the other person to make sure that they feel real pleasure. That's that failure of sexual empathy. That's one of the things that you need to take care of. Then there is a failure of reciprocity. And in essence, that was coming into the other things that I was talking about. Both people need to make the same level of contribution to the lovemaking or to give and receive in reasonably equal amounts. And we've kind of talked about that. And then the last one is failure of, now get this one, over-romanticization. So sometimes, although research indicates that most men are even more romantic about relationships than women, there's often still a lack of romance in long-term marriages, which is what we've been talking about tonight. Thus, the need for skill. Skill is built with romance, novelty, flirting, eroticism, and emotional arousal. Sex is really good for you. A Johns Hopkins study found that the body's endorphin production, which is all those happy things in your brain, increases by 200% after a sexual encounter. Sex also relieves headaches, depression, gives you relaxation, and your immune system also reaps the benefits. And you know that a healthy sex life and a healthy, intimate romantic bond refuel us, give us energy, give us more renewal than anything else in life. So I want each one of us to have a romantic bond that's satisfying and has wonderful sprinklings of novelty and arousal that delight us, surprise us, renew us, and give us hope even when the going gets tough. So become a romantic bond expert, dears. It'll last a lifetime. Thanks for tuning in to the Red Room tonight. I'll be back next week. And this Friday, if you're interested, I'm teaching a 3-hour class on forgiveness. If you'd like to know more about that, just pop me an email. And until then, I'm signing off from the Red Room, and I'll see you at the same time next week with the 6th component of marriage relationship. Good night, everyone.